Hi, afternoon. My name is Suvankar, and I'm a clinical neurologist with an interest in various neuroprogressive disorders. And thanks to Emma and Tom for the invitation here today. It was really nice actually to reconnect with Abhishek and Michael, who I've met in my neurology clinics over the last decade, with people who are thriving now, having had the misfortune of seeing me in clinic for their diagnosis earlier. But the focus of my talk this afternoon is on motor neuron disease, and Rachel set the scene really nicely to discuss the background of this difficult problem. So all of the disorders we're talking about here today are devastating. One of the key challenges for people living with motor neuron disease is the combination of physical symptoms and rapidity of decline, really, associated with cognitive problems as well. And we've heard that the life expectancy of people living with motor neuron disease is really limited at 2 to 3 years, but one in 3 dying within a year and 50% actually dying within 2 years of diagnosis, so a really devastating rate of decline. The really crucial thing against this background is that there's only one licensed treatment that we have in the UK that was licensed over 25 years ago. And despite the best efforts of a number of clinical research teams globally over the last decade, we haven't found any better treatments. And the reason for that has been a number of different things, but one of them being that we haven't really had the major opportunity for people living with motor neuron disease to participate in studies. Many of the studies before have been too limited in their inclusion criteria. The rates of change of people's symptoms have meant that it's been difficult for people to participate in trials. When people have participated, they've often had to drop out because of the challenges of taking part for regular assessments. So what we understood several years ago is that we need to improve how people participate, but then also think about how we innovate in trial design. So when we've thought about this, what we've realized is that people living with the disease are really at the heart of all our research activity. And we've heard a lot about this in various of the sessions today, but people who live with the condition are the most vocal advocates for raising awareness of the unmet needs. And we've heard about active PPI groups which have been used to define the important research questions. I mean, too often it's been the researchers who've thought about what the research questions should be. And then once those research questions have been defined, how do we shape the study design and make protocols for research more participant-centered? Increasingly, we've had active patient groups that have supported us with regulatory approvals, so the Research Ethics Committee approvals and approvals from the medicines regulators, the MHRA. So that with complex trial designs that I'll come on to talk about, it's been really important that we've had a clear understanding of patient information sheets and consent forms. We've heard today about representation on research steering committees, and also design of studies that are really seeking participant feedback when they're in studies. And from Rachel just now about how it's important that when we apply for funding applications that people living with the condition give feedback as to how robust the applications are and how we can improve on study design. So I wanted to start off by talking about the Scottish MND Register, which is a real strength of Scotland. It's a homegrown project, and this was the first global register for people living with MND and first launched in the late 1980s and then rebooted with the help of funding from MND Scotland and awareness from Scottish Government in 2015. And this allows us to follow up people living with MND right from diagnosis to death. And we have 99% case ascertainment in Scotland, and over the last decade it's supported a number of observational studies to learn about symptoms and how they progress. But crucially, it's also supported tissue banking to understand about genetic causes. And one of the key strengths that we have in Scotland now is people sign up for the most really generous donation that they can make, which is brain and spinal cord donation. And we have over 120 people who've contributed to this, which has led to a much better understanding of the underlying biological basis of motor neuron disease. But really what people obviously want who are living with this condition are better treatments. That's the key thing. And the trial that we've launched now 2 years ago, MND Smart, was co-produced alongside people living with MND. And really after open consultation, what we've realized is that the overwhelming majority of people living with MND want the opportunity to participate in clinical trials. And they draw comparisons with cancer, where if you're diagnosed with cancer, you do have an opportunity to participate in not just one or two, but a suite of different studies over the course of your illness. And so the opportunity to participate in trials should really be the standard of care, not just an optional bolted-on extra in a few centres around the UK. And we wanted to design trial criteria that were inclusive, and people living with MND fed back to us that they wanted drugs that could be given as liquids, that could be given in more advanced stages of the disease. And also they wanted to reduce the amount of appointments or travel time to clinic and use technologies. This was even before the pandemic, thinking about how we could use technology for video conferencing based follow-ups. And so we've tried to meet all of these challenges, and we have liquid drug delivered to people's homes with video conferencing based follow-up, and we're trying hard now to introduce new measures for digital technology for remote follow-up. So we've had to obviously come up with a big interdisciplinary team ranging from drug discovery to trial design and statistics and how we deliver clinical trials. But the key people that have been involved in this are people living with the condition, and they're the key members of the trial design team. So the details of this slide don't matter, but this is a really innovative trial design that we've launched now, which is a multi-arm, multi-stage trial. So we're testing more than one active drug at the same time, and a number of neurological disorders are following this pattern, including in Parkinson's and dementia and multiple sclerosis. And we have interim analysis points where we can have a look at how the drugs are working in comparison to the placebo arm. And we have standard outcome measures that will look at if a drug is failing, we can stop it early on and substitute with a new drug, which is one of the strengths and the efficiencies of this so-called MAMS, multi-arm, multi-stage design. And when we launched just before the pandemic in February 2020, we had a major media attention, which we were really not expecting. It ended up being the lead story on the 6 o'clock BBC News nationally and then the 10 o'clock news. And since we launched, we've had over 2,000 people living with MND in the UK sign up to participate in the study, which represents over a quarter of people living with this condition. And where we are just now is that we have opened at 17 sites across the UK, all the way from Inverness in the north, and Javier's here representing the Inverness principal investigator, all the way to Exeter in the south. And we've recruited people from places like the Orkney Isles and the Isle of Wight, where actually people have never taken part in neurological trials before because of the nature of the trial design. And we're almost at 400 participants, and our recruitment rate has been, thanks to the input from participants, almost 400. And we've had a very low rate of dropout, and again, we think this reflects the study design, which has been co-produced with people living with the condition. And as we've gone on in the last 2 years, we've learned even more from people living with MND and participants of the study. Through COVID, we've innovated further, and we've introduced more protocol amendments, including remote appointments, more e-consenting. Really, it's trying to reduce the burden of participants who are having to live with a progressive condition, and really we don't want to be taking up more of their time or repeating tests. So if they have some measures done as part of routine clinical care, we don't need to repeat them in the trial. And similarly, if we have tests that are done as part of the trial, we can share that with clinical care teams, and that's worked very effectively. One of the things that's helping us learn more about motor neuron disease and what causes it and how we might be better at treating it is to learn a bit more about the biology of the disease, and this has been helped by collecting blood and other samples over the duration of the trial. And this has been something that people with MND have supported, but also they support membership of the Tissue Steering Committee that looks at applications that come in from researchers to do studies on these samples. And this has led to establishing a national community. So we now have a community of 17 sites. We'll be opening in Northern Ireland soon, another site in London, and a couple on the south coast in Brighton and Poole. And it has really led to a buzz amongst individuals who live with the condition, but also clinical researchers. And you can see here from some of the representative quotes from people living with MND who are participating in the study that really being able to participate in MND Smart has offered a sense of hope that really wasn't there before. So we have a couple of bespoke studies that are really focusing in directly on the attitudes and experiences of participants and caregivers, continuously trying to improve how we design and deploy further protocol amendments and to make the study protocol more patient-centered. And we've published a protocol for an observational study which is looking at the factors that influence why people participate in trials and why they also drop out. So we have a team that are interviewing people at regular time periods and also at the end of the study if they drop out or if they come to the natural conclusion to continuously try and improve. So that's my time up, and I think it's just a summary slide here just to say that we've been tremendously successful in launching despite the COVID pandemic, but really the success has been due to co-production alongside people living with MND. It's encouraged high rates of recruitment, retention and participant satisfaction, and we've really accelerated innovation in trials, and what we're doing has been templated by a number of other conditions. Thanks very much. Thank you.